that you please fasten your seatbelts at this time. And please turn off all electronic devices such as laptops and cell phones to ensure maximum concentration. Smoking is hereby prohibited for the duration of the flight. Thanks for choosing King FM. Enjoy your flights. World in Review begins now. Yeah, and of course, a very wonderful afternoon to you out there once again under the sound of my voice. 2:22 p.m. Nigerian time, the studio of King 103.9 FM. Of course, it's time once again for another exciting edition of World in Review on this dial, King 103.9 FM. And of course, I'm your regular host on the show every Friday afternoon, 2:15 p.m. Nigerian time to 3 p.m. Nigerian time. Unfortunately, Abolade Sodiq and the news crew have bitten in deep into our time once again. Okay, the little time that is left in front of me, about 37 minutes. I'm going to try as much as possible to make judicious use of the time and try as much as possible to make sense of some news that's been flying around in the foreign scene throughout the course of this week. Once again, I'm Ajibola Samuel. Welcome to another exciting edition of World in Review on this dial, King 103.9 FM. Yeah, this program is being streamed live right now on the official Facebook fan page of King FM, King FM 1039 Ibadan. You write it together, one word, no space, and of course, you get to put a face to the voice that you are hearing on the station right now. Once again, I'm Ajibola Samuel, and without further ado, let's delve into the various stories that I've been able to package for you throughout the course of this week. Okay, in case you happen to be joining the show for the very first time, basically what we do on the show is to bring you the news, highlight the news that made the headlines, that hawked the headlines throughout the course of the week, and the foreign scene. Yeah, we discuss everything outside of the shores of the country Nigeria. Of course, you've been listening to the different news across different news platforms, across different radio stations, everything that happened in the Nigerian scene. What we do on the show on this day, Friday, 2:15 p.m. Nigerian time to 3 p.m. Nigerian time, is to highlight the news and of course bring to you the news that happened outside of the shores of Nigeria, give you an analytical and a periscopical views into the various news, so as to have a perfect understanding of what's going on around the world. Okay, without further ado, once again, even though I've added a little bit of ado, let's delve into the various news, and of course let's start officially World in Review for today, the 25th day in the month of March 2021, and unfortunately, happens to be the 284th day after today. Happens to be the 84th day out of the 365 days we've got in the year. After today, we've got just 281 days, and we are gonna be saying Happy New Year 2023. I'm Ajibola Samuel once again. This is World in Review, and you are listening to King 103.9 FM. Okay, just like we do every Fridays on the show, we start from the African scene before, of course, we go to other part of the world and bring you the news that's emerged from there. Starting from the African scene once again. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia has led to quite a lot of turmoil in the world. In the United Kingdom right now, the fuel scarcity is actually raging in that part of the world. The Eurozone is, of course, also suffering their own also. I mean, the price of gas in the Eurozone has actually escalated because, according to statistics, the Russia actually supplies about 40% of the gas that is used in the Eurozone daily. Now, with the bans and of course the sanctions that have been placed on Russia, the gas imports are not coming in again. This has led to increase in prices of gas in the Eurozone, and of course increase in the price of Brent crude oil price in the Americas and of course other parts of the world. In Egypt right now, the food prices have actually swelled and escalating, prices of food, because in Egypt they actually depend heavily on the imports of grains and wheat and rice that comes in from Ukraine and from Russia. But due to the war that's happening in that region, unfortunately Egypt have not been able to import grains and wheat, and to a very large extent the price of bread especially in Egypt has escalated. The government at some point even had to weigh in and try as much as possible to control the price. Well, it's not only in Egypt, it's happening across different African countries, as escalation of oil and fuel prices, escalation of food prices. It's happening in South Sudan, and of course in South Sudan there is a massive protest that's going on in that country right now. But moving forward quickly, right now in Ghana, the economic situation is also biting hard in Ghana, and earlier this week the Ghanaian government actually came about resolved. According to the news, Ghana government actually decides to cut salaries of appointees. That's talking about the members of parliament, the ministers and the cabinets, cutting their salaries by 30% to actually manage the economic crisis in Ghana. The Ghanaian government announced a 30% salary cut for its appointees. This is one of the measures introduced by the government to actually mitigate against economic hardship in the country. The presidency disclosed this on Twitter on the 23rd of March, that was this Wednesday, adding that all measures have been approved by the Ghanaian president, Nana Akufo-Addo. Other measures taken include the reopening of land borders in 2 weeks, and it said that the borders have actually remained shut since the start of COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, but as it stands right now, it's been reopened so as to ease the economic downturn in that country. And it is said that Ghana Central Bank also raised the policy rates by 250 basis points to 17%. This means that the cost of borrowing in that country will shoot up. Additionally, the government is going to pump about $2 billion into the economy to help stabilize the Ghana cedi, which has been falling in value to the dollar and other international currency of trade for the past few months. And Ken Ofori-Atta, the Ghana's finance minister, actually addressed the media to explain in details the measures that is taken and the measures that have been tailored to mitigate the current economic challenges. Let's take a quick trip to Ghana right now and listen to the voice of the finance minister of Ghana actually stating the claims or the measures that the Ghanaian government is set to take in order to, ease the economic downturn in their country.
So expenditure cutting measures. Discretionary spending is to be further cut 10%. The Ministry of Finance is currently meeting with MDAs to review their spending plans for the rest of the 3 quarters to achieve the discretionary expenditure cuts. 2, these times call for very efficient use of energy resources. In line with this, there will be a 50% cut in fuel coupon allocations for all political appointees and heads of government institutions, including SOEs, effective 1st February 2022. With immediate effect, government has imposed a complete moratorium on the purchase of imported vehicles for the rest of the year. This will affect all new orders, especially four-wheel drives. We will ensure that the overall effect is to reduce total vehicle purchases by the public sector by at least 50% for the period. Again, with immediate effect, government has imposed a moratorium on all foreign travels except pre-approved critical statutory travels. 5, government will conclude on ongoing measures to eliminate ghost workers from the government payroll by end December 2022. Government will conclude the renegotiations of the energy sector IPP's capacity charges by end of quarter 3 2022 to further reduce excess capacity payments by 20% to generate a total savings of 1.5 billion Ghana cedis. We will impose a moratorium,
especially the minority members of parliament declining and insisting that they are actually not going to allow or agree to the 30% cut of their own salaries. And as it stands right now, quite a lot of people are raising, different accusations and different arguments saying, well, there are better ways to actually manage the economy. The government needs to reduce some unnecessary spendings and not cutting by 30% the wages of the appointees. And of course, quite a lot of accusations have been coming. Well, as it stands right now, members of the minority caucus in the parliament in Ghana have declined to join their colleagues in the majority and members of the executive to cut their remuneration by 30% in order to address economic challenges confronting the country. Like I said earlier, government actually announced the 30% salary cut for its appointees as part of austerity measures to resolve the prevailing economic crisis. It is said that quite a lot of members of parliament in the minority said, especially Mr. Pakomwisi on Wednesday, the ranking member on the Roads and Transport Committee, Kwame Agboza, said the government's suggestion is deceptive. He explained that the majority of the NPP MPs, that's members of parliament, are on board of the state institution, so they draw other remuneration from these boards and other things, whereas members of NDC, which is another political party, that is the minority party, are not on any boards. So even if they let go of all their salaries, they will be able to find money elsewhere. Okay, our time is fast spent on the show already, so I'll just cut the long story short and take another quick trip to Ghana. We get to listen to the dissenting voices of the members of parliament that actually object to the 30% salary cut in Ghana. Because of our time, this is a very long about 8 minutes, but I'll try as much as possible to cut it bit by bit so we can make sense of what's going on in Ghana right now.
Well, a pay cut depends on a number of issues. As a country, we have three arms of government: the executive, judiciary, and then the legislature. Now, if the executive is talking about a pay cut, then they should also look at the emoluments. What facilities do they have? As executive, they have more facilities than legislators. We, for instance, provide a lot of facilities for ourselves. We pay our drivers. We pay, currently some of us are paying our secretariat. We pay our other things that we do. We buy our own fuel. In fact, some of us, almost all of us, and even including MPPs, MPs, we are spending our salaries in our constituencies. That is what is happening. The entire 2021, we were given 1/4 of our MPs' common fund. In fact, district assemblies, municipal and metropolitan assemblies, the entire 2021, they never had a quota. What they had was arrears of 2020. So if I'm a member of parliament, the money that I am supposed to use to execute certain basic projects in our constituencies, those monies are not coming out. Spend money every single week. In fact, by the time our salary...
Yeah, okay, ladies and gentlemen, because of our time that is fast spent, that is how much I would be able to take talking about the dissenting voices that are actually objecting to the 30% salary cut. And as it stands right now, well, quite a lot of conversations and of course argument has still been raised. Unfortunately, I would have to leave the story now because we've got quite a lot of story from Africa and of course from outside of the African continent. Okay, moving forward quickly, let's leave Ghana right now and of course go to another country in Africa. Okay, this time around I'm in Kenya. Donated COVID-19 vaccines actually expire in Kenya, and it is said that nearly 840,000 COVID-19 vaccines have expired in Kenya. Yeah, come to think of it, just a couple of months ago, the WHO was fighting the developed world or the Western countries that the COVID-19, vaccine apartheid that is happening in the world is not, cool. And of course, it's not sane for the world. They should try as much as possible to help the African continent, donate COVID-19 vaccines. And look at us here in Africa, 840,000 vaccines expiring. Well, the Kenya government have announced in a statement on Wednesday that the vaccines are those that were received through donation, deploring a persistent lack of confidence in vaccination as well as the short life of the doses. These are AstraZeneca vaccines received through the Global COVAX initiative. The Health Ministry statement actually read, "Every expired dose represents a missed opportunity to save life," it added. And it is said that about 30% of the targeted population in Kenya have been vaccinated against the coronavirus, but vaccinations have slowed considerably in recent weeks, which have actually seen the prevalence of the disease decline. At the beginning of February, some 252,000 anti-COVID doses were being administered daily across the country, but this figure actually dropped to 30,000. Okay, I would like to cut the long story short. Let's take a quick trip to Kenya and get to listen to the Ministry of Health representative actually talking about the expired doses of COVID-19 vaccine. Once again, about 840,000 expired doses of COVID-19 vaccines in Kenya.
So on certain days, us being able to vaccinate close to 200,000 doses in a day, and more than 3 million doses that were administered over a 2-week period, that the country may not be able to utilize all the AstraZeneca doses that are available before expiry. These reports indicate that every county has some expiries, with the highest being in Nakuru at 35,000, followed by Busia at 27,980, Kajiado at 25,770, Kakamega at 12,870, Kwale at 11,730.
Similarly, Kenya is staring at yet another looming.
We accept donation of vaccines whose shelf life is at least 4 months at the time of delivery. 2, we shall work with counties and partners to scale up communication towards demand generation.
Yeah, okay, ladies and gentlemen, the voice of the representative of the Health Ministry in Kenya actually coming out to give us a detailed analysis of the expired COVID-19 vaccines. And of course, in the later part of that voice clip, she was actually detailing how they are gonna proceed in the future to try as much as possible to curb the expiration and the wastage of COVID-19 vaccines in that country. Okay, I'll leave in Kenya quickly.
And in colleges and
Okay, where should I go next? Okay, there's news from Zimbabwe. There's a good news from Ethiopia. There is news from... Okay, let's talk about Zimbabwe. As it stands right now in Zimbabwe, they are set to cast on their key votes in a parliamentary and local election tomorrow. That is the 26th day in the month of March 2021. And it is said that the by-elections have a potential to set the tone for next year's national election, where they will actually be voting for the president and of course voting for other parliamentarians. Okay, as it stands right now, Zimbabwe's National Assembly has about 270 parliamentarians, of which 210 are actually elected, and 60 additional parliamentarians are brought into the house through a quota system reserved for women. And talking about the election tomorrow, 28 parliamentary seats are up for grabs, so they are going to be voting for 28 parliamentary seats. And of course, 105 local government council seats are also up for grabs. And it is said that the 28 parliamentary seats are vacant due to recalls and deaths of the representative. And of course, the empty seats constitute about 13.3% of Zimbabwe's 210 elective parliamentary seats, and the council's position represents about 5.4% of the 1,958 local government seats. So once again in Zimbabwe, there are 270 parliamentarian seats, and 210 are voted for. But tomorrow, the by-election, we see people vote for just 28 out of the 210. The General Assembly or the general elections will be held in 2023. And of course, out of the 1,958 local government seats that are available in that country, just 105 local government seats are actually going to be voted for in that country. So let's do a quick build up and try as much as possible to paint a picture of how the campaigns have been going down in preparation for the elections, the by-elections that are scheduled to take place in Zimbabwe tomorrow, the 26th day in the month of March 2022.
No amount of names that you give to me will change the idea whose hour is come. ZANU-PF has failed to run this country for the past 4 decades. Our people have been subjected to economic abuse. Our people have been subjected to health collapse, spearheaded and hated for by ZANU-PF. So young people in particular who have their future at stake must be able to join this movement, because this is the movement of the people, and this is the movement that we are prepared to die for. Why? Because there's no struggle without bruises, my brother. There's no struggle without pain. There's no struggle without contradiction. So that's why we're here. And ZANU must know that we are prepared to surrender ourselves before we surrender the citizens' movement. Look, jobs are here. Employment for young people is here. A proper health for young people is here. Free education is here. ZANU-PF has failed to provide that. ZANU-PF has failed to provide even for their own. ZANU, without doubt that we are going to shall rule this country.
President wangu wa Monzora vanogara vachitaura kuti youths are not leaders of tomorrow, but youths are leaders of today. That's why you see kuti mu leadership ye MDCT inotungamirirwa na President Monzora mune vechidiki vakawanda.
Yeah, okay, ladies and gentlemen, time is fast spent on the show, so we just have to leave it at that. You can hear the voice of some of the youths in that country actually coming out to say this is our time, and of course, we must try as much as possible to redefine the political definition of that particular country. Okay, you hear the voice of some of the contestants also, but as it stands right now, I wouldn't be able to do a comprehensive build-up to the by-election that will be holding tomorrow, but I think that paints enough picture. Moving forward quickly. Okay, the conflict in Tigray and the civil war in Ethiopia that has started mid-November 2020. It's been about 16 months right now. Okay, good news from Ethiopia. The Ethiopia government on Thursday declared an indefinite humanitarian truce effective immediately. That was on Thursday, saying it's up to help hasten delivery of emergency into the Tigray region, where hundreds of people are actually said to be facing starvation. Okay, if you've been following this on this station and of course this program, you probably understand what's happening in Ethiopia and of course the events leading to the Ethiopian civil war and the crisis that is happening in the Tigrayan region. And for those that have not been following this program, to a very large extent, you might not understand what is going on. So, in order to help you understand, let me just try as much as possible to go back in time. I would have loved to play this particular voice excerpt that explain what happens. You know, it was a throwback to the program I did then, you know, explaining what happened or what is happening in Ethiopia. But time is fast spent. This is about 15 minutes and I don't even have 15 minutes on the show, whereas I have quite a lot of news to take from different, you know, countries in the world. Okay, let's break it down. Ethiopia is Ethiopia is actually a federal state, just like we had in Nigeria in the past. We used to have the western region, we had the eastern region, and of course we had the northern region. All those regions are autonomous and they are under the federal government of Nigeria. This is the system that is practiced in Ethiopia up to date. Yeah, they have the federal government which sits in Addis Ababa, that's the capital of the country, and they have different ethnic groups that actually run their own governance, albeit autonomously and independently. They have the Oromo ethnic group, they have the Tigray People Liberation Front, they have the Amara people, they are quite a lot of ethnic people group in that particular country, and all of them actually run their governments in their particular region autonomously and independently. While trying to build up to what led to the war, okay, the Tigrayan people have actually been at the ends of affair. They've actually been running things in the federal capital territory, if there's anything like that in Ethiopia. They've been in government for the past 30 years. And as it stands right now, the Tigrayan people in Ethiopia constitutes about 6% of that country's population. That is, they are a very small ethnic group. But back then, they teamed up with the Eritrean people to actually, fight against a particular warlord, or let me say a dictator back then. So actually, deposed him and took over power. Okay, don't let me tell that roots. The Tigrayan people have been in power for over 30 years, up until 2015. And why they were in power for that 30 years, quite a lot of people, especially in other regions, view their government as being autocratic and as being too strict, and to a very large extent they view them as repressive and of course not giving people enough freedom. So at the end of the day, in 2015, a certain man, Abiy Ahmed, came into power. He's from the Oromo ethnic group, and of course that actually puts an end to the 30 years rule of the Tigrayan people in Ethiopia. Yeah, initially there was a coalition between the party of Abiy Ahmed and the Tigrayan, People's Liberation Front, and of course that particular coalition was supposed to ensure that, to a very large extent, the Tigrayan people are still very much in power. But after some couple of months, Abiy Ahmed decided to actually kick out, people he considered as corrupt and people that have benefited from the 30 years of repressive rule of the Tigrayan people. He jailed some and actually kicked some out of power. And the Tigrayan people that have ruled the country for over 30 years saw this as an affront and saw it as a spit on their face that someone that they helped bring into power is now biting the finger that actually fed it. So what happened, what led to the war precisely was the fact that, elections were actually scheduled to take place in Ethiopia in 2020. But unfortunately, Abiy Ahmed, due to COVID-19 back then, decided to postpone the election some couple of months after. So the Tigrayan people decided that no, we are not going to, obey this particular command. They feel that Abiy Ahmed is scared of holding an election because he might lose in the election, and they felt that they wouldn't, obey the rule of the federal government back then. So they went on and held election in their own region, in their own territory, despite the federal government, insisting that the election should not be held due to COVID-19. And Abiy Ahmed and the federal government actually saw this as an affront and saw it as, a disobedience to the order of the federal government in that particular country. Okay, months later or weeks after, it was reported by the federal government that the Tigrayan people actually attacked an army barrack that belonged to the federal government that is in the Tigray region, and this to a very large extent led to the federal government actually retaliating, and it escalated into a full-blown civil war between Addis Ababa and of course the Tigrayan people. And as it stands right now, since war broke out in Ethiopia mid-November 2020, it is said that thousands have died and many more have been forced to flee their homes as conflict expanded from Tigray to the neighboring regions of Amara and of course Afar. And the figures have been quoted: thousands of people have died, millions have been displaced, and they said that about 400,000 people do not have access to food, and they are reported to have died due to starvation. But according to this news, an humanitarian truce have been declared, and as it stands right now, it is in aim or in hope that food and of course other aid material are actually going to be accessible to the Tigrayan people and the civilians that do not have access to food and aid material, and this will help to prevent loss of life in that country. Okay, too much time spent in the African continent already. Let's try as much as possible bring other news that broke out from other parts of the world. Okay, leaving Africa and going to the Middle East right now. Afghan takeover. The Taliban in Afghanistan have actually ordered girls' schools to close hours after opening. Okay, when the Taliban actually took over Afghanistan, this was one of the fears of the Western world and everybody outside Afghanistan, or even some people in Afghanistan. We express fears that the ladies or the female gender in that particular country would not have 100% freedom, and the education of the female girls can actually be cut short. Well, our fears seem to have come to pass. The Taliban ordered girls' secondary schools in Afghanistan to shut on Wednesday, just as after they reopened, sparking outbreak and confusion over the policy reversal by the Adlan and Islamic groups. The U-turn was announced after thousands of girls resumed lessons for the first time since August, when the Taliban seized control of the country and imposed harsh restrictions on women. Okay, initially, when the Taliban actually took over in the country, they initially said that they are going to allow the freedom of girls and female gender are going to be allowed to have a job in government secretariats. They are going to allow girls to go to schools, blah blah, and the ladies have been waiting for these opportunities to actually be able to resume classes once again. They waited hours, days, months, and unfortunately they resumed classes on Wednesday, only for the Taliban and the government in that country, Afghanistan, to make a U-turn and announced that girls' schools should be closed in that country. Okay, a quick trip to Afghanistan, and let's listen to the voice of heartbroken girls, and people expressing their concerns about them not being able to go to schools in Afghanistan.
Why are they playing with our future? We are humans of this country. We want to continue our education. Is being a girl a sin? Is studying a sin?
It was like a day of mourning, and it was a very sad day. It was like losing a loved one. Everyone was crying. The girls were hugging and crying and saying goodbye.
I was happy and excited when I found out I was going to school, but we were hardly there for 30 minutes when they kicked us out and shut the door and left us hopeless.
Yeah, they were barely just resumed school some couple of minutes ago, only for them to be kicked out once again, and the announcement broke.
We want our schools to reopen like before.
That the girls should go back home. No schools for the girl child in Afghanistan. Hopefully, I'll say a prayer for Afghanistan, for the girls especially, that probably, okay, the schools will be reopened and the ladies or the girl child will have a life once again in Afghanistan. The United Nations actually came out to, condemn the announcements of Afghanistan, the Taliban in Afghanistan.
The Secretary General says that denial of education not only violates the equal rights of women and girls to education, it also jeopardizes the country's future in view of the tremendous contributions by Afghan women and girls.
Denial of education violates the human rights of women and girls beyond their right to education. It leaves them more exposed to violence, poverty, and exploitation.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you heard there the voice of condemnation of the United Nations, the policy made by the Taliban and the Afghan government. Okay, it's been over a month. Okay, it was on Thursday that it was officially a month that Russia invaded Ukraine. And of course, quite a lot of things have happened in that particular 1 month duration of that particular invasion. The stringent sanctions that have been placed on Russia unfortunately seems not to be helping. The nuclear threats, the talks that have held in Kiev, the talks that have held in Belarus, the talks that have held in the United, the Eurozone, unfortunately, it's not working. On the 3rd of March, Kherson actually fought. Russian troops gained ground in the south where they lay siege to the strategic port of Mariupol in a bid to link up territory held by pro-Russian rebels. Yeah, on the 3rd of March, there was a media crackdown. On the 8th of March, the first evacuation from that country actually happened. On the 8th of March, also in a bid to starve Moscow of funds of the war, United States President Joe Biden actually announced a ban on the U.S. imports of Russian oil and gas. Yeah, on the 13th of March, there were strikes near Poland. TV protest happened on the 14th of March. The remembrance of Pearl Harbor happened on the 16th of March. War criminal. Okay, Putin was actually branded a war criminal by U.S. Joe Biden, the U.S. President Joe Biden, on the 17th of March. Hypersonic weapons being deployed. On the 18th of March, Zelensky actually coming out to address different particular parliaments, address the Parliament of the United Kingdom, address the Italian Parliament. It's out. Time is fast spent already. Unfortunately, I will not be able to do a bit of build up to the 1 month of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But let's listen to the voice of the Ukrainian president actually coming out to speak on the day that is clocked a month that Russia actually invaded Ukraine. This is Mr. President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, speaking to the world on the 24th of March, 2022.
The war of Russia is not only the war against Ukraine. Its meaning is much wider. Russia started the war against freedom as it is. This is only the beginning for Russia on the Ukrainian land. Russia is trying to defeat the freedom of all people in Europe, of all the people in the world. It tries to show that only crude and cruel force matters. It tries to show that people do not matter, as well as everything else that make us people. That's the reason we all must stop Russia. The world must stop the war. I thank everyone who acts in support of Ukraine, in support of freedom, but the war continues. The acts of terror against peaceful people go on. 1 month already. That's long. It breaks my hearts of all Ukrainians and every free person on the planet. That's why I ask you to stand against the war, starting from March 24th, exactly 1 month after the Russian invasion. From this day and after then, show your standing. Come from your office.
Try as much as possible to cut the long story short. The Omicron variant of COVID-19, the WHO is still warning us that we shouldn't let the war happening in Ukraine, shift our focus away from Omicron, and COVID-19 still very much, missed us. Try as much as possible to stay safe. Use your nose mask. Wash your hands, when with, hand sanitizers, soap and water, and try as much as possible to maintain, a proper hygiene to make the world a safe place. The WHO is still warning us. COVID-19 is still very much out there. The country should not be complacent.
It's premature for any country either to surrender or to declare victory. This virus is dangerous.
My name is Ajibola Samuel. Of course, it was a pleasure doing this. Join me again same time, same station next week Friday for another exciting edition of the program World in Review on this dial. Have a wonderful weekend ahead of you. Stay safe. Just like I said, COVID-19 is still very much, in our midst. So the kisses and the cuddling and the hugs, can stay put for now. We get, time to do a lot of that in the future. Have a wonderful weekend ahead of you. Stay safe, ladies and gentlemen. Au revoir.
Virus. We need people to be aware that this virus is